everyone, how are you Scooby-Doo doing? This is the 4th episode of my podcast. We will be discussing the 4th episode of the What's New Scooby-Doo series, which is Big Scare in the Big Easy. This is Season 1, Episode 4. I remember really loving this episode as a kid. I think it must be something about New Orleans because my favourite Disney film is The Princess and the Frog. I love the music played and also the costumes for Mardi Gras. Also the voodoo shop. I thought it was quite cool. It has a slight Halloween feel to this episode and I love that. I'll be talking about this episode and other things I noticed about the Scooby-Doo series that hopefully you will find interesting as well. Definitely give this episode a watch if you haven't seen it before, or even if you have, it's such a good episode. This is the first episode where we see the opening theme before we see the opening scene. Although this may just be my DVD, but I found it odd that all the other 3 have the opening scene and then the opening theme, but this episode started off with the opening theme. So we start off in a cemetery. The music playing is very upbeat, has a New Orleans kind of feel to it. A bus taking people on tours is coming through. To be honest, the bus driver for this tour bus is quite bad. The bus is haphazardly driving over rocks. The passengers clearly look worried before anything bad actually happens. If the driving wasn't terrifying enough, the bus gets stuck in the mud and 2 ghosts appear on top of 2 graves. The ghosts seem to be soldiers that are wearing Confederate uniforms. We can see on one of the graves it says Leland. The 2 soldiers start to fight each other using the wind of leaves. They then start to levitate into the air before their eyes glow red and they notice the bus. They move towards the bus and look through the windows at the people menacingly while groaning. The people inside the bus look scared and the bus driver tries to move the bus away. We see a close-up of one of the ghosts' faces before it fades to black. There's no opening theme because it's already happened at the beginning. This is really odd. If anyone knows if this is how it was aired or just a mess up on the DVD, it would be great to know because it's kind of bugging me. After the fade to black, which should have been the opening theme, we see a street sign which says Bourbon Street. There's a parade and we see the gang all dressed up in costumes. Shaggy is dressed as a tomato, Scooby is dressed as a ghost, Fred is dressed as a plague doctor, Velma is dressed as a jester, and Daphne is dressed in some sort of Mardi Gras outfit. I love the music that's playing, it's very upbeat and I want to say it makes me think of New Orleans, but I've never actually been. It does remind me of the type of music you see in films or an episode set in New Orleans. There's some cool floats that look really well decorated and colourful. There's one float that we see that has mermaids on it with a huge clam shell. And another float we see has a jack-in-the-box and marbles and some letter blocks like children's toys. Shaggy mentions that spring break in New Orleans is the coolest. This is interesting because normally there's a reason they've gone somewhere. The snowboarding competition in the first episode, Velma wins the competition at the CEA. They went to Costa Rica because they were invited by Daphne's uncle. However, here it seems like they just went here for a vacation during their spring break. Also, we don't see the mystery machine in this episode either, probably due to being in a different location and the fact the gang probably flew here rather than drove. Scooby sees a food cart with a man cleaning a sign which says free food. Scooby dives into it. The man cleaning the sign jumps back and we can clearly see it says lactose free food. I do find that quite funny. It says lactose free food and then just has fruit in it. Not even like lactose free cheese or anything. He has food that wouldn't have lactose in it anyway, and then made a sign to entice lactose-free people. I'm not judging, I'm sure it really helps business, but it seems a little ridiculous. Scooby ends up knocking down not only the cart to the floor, but also the man tending the food cart. At first he looks annoyed at Scooby before he rips Scooby's ghost costume so we can see his face, and he licks the man tending the cart's face and he smiles. It seems like he's forgiven him and the gang laugh. Let's hope Scooby got away with that and didn't have to pay for any damages, like the cart being broken and all the food going on the floor becoming ruined and the man being unable to sell it anymore. Velma asks Shaggy which way it is to one of the hotels. Shaggy doesn't know, but then pulls out quite a few brochures from inside his costume. Weirdly, they come out of his costume covered with red stuff, which almost makes his costume look like it was made from a real tomato, which is a bit weird as I would assume it's plastic. Shaggy chooses the Leland Gables brochure, which just so happens to be located the other side of the graveyard. The gang now seem to be back in their normal clothes as they walk through the graveyard. Daphne mentions that the cemetery is spooky. and Fred comments that there's no graves. Daphne agrees and says there's just these cute little cabanas. Velma informs them that they're actually called fours. The ground is too swampy for regular burials. They use above ground tombs which have been used for hundreds of years. This is a genuine fact as well. Although it's a little morbid, it is true for New Orleans. It's quite interesting really the way different places have to adapt due to how their land is. As interesting as this is, it doesn't seem to stop the ghosts from interrupting. We see the cemetery start to get foggy. Scooby notices a strange noise, and we see two shadows above the graves. As the shadows get clearer, the gang can see their ghosts, the same ghosts we saw from the opening theme. Daphne points and says, "Look, ghosts!" Fred's response is, "Run!" The gang are chased by the ghosts before the tour bus from the opening scene arrives. The doors open, and they are told to climb in by Crawdad Mike, and the bus driver speeds away from the ghosts. Crawdad tells them they're lucky, and that another couple of minutes they would have met Les Frères Leland. Daphne translates this as the Leland brothers. We also find out that Daphne went to French club, so that's why she can understand and translate what Crawdad Mike is saying. Velma asks, "Who are the Leland brothers?" Crawdad Mike explains that they were brothers that were on opposite sides during the Civil War, and that they hated each other. The two brothers had duelled in that cemetery, which was their family graveyard, and they still haunt it today every night. Daphne asks how he knows all this, and Crawdad Mike tells them his name and informs them that he is their guide for the best tour in New Orleans. We hear clapping and cheers, and the gang notice that the bus has other people on it, obviously on the tour before the gang were rescued. They get off the bus and are looking outside the Leland gables. Shaggy thinks the hotel looks scary and doesn't want to go in. Velma says that's fine, he can stay where he is, right next to the graveyard. Shaggy decides, as both are Creepsville, he'll choose the one that probably has a kitchen. I mean, to be fair, given the choice, I'd choose the one that has food as well. As the gang enter the Leland Gables, they see Cyrus T. Buford arguing with Lorelei Leland. He tells her she's crazy and she has no choice but to sell. She informs him that it's Leland land and that while he's the boss at his resort, he isn't the boss here. She's in charge. She asks him to leave as she sees she has guests. Cyrus says to the gang that he's sure they'll enjoy their stay if they survive. Scooby looks panicked and repeats, "Survived?" Lorelei tells them not to pay any attention to Cyrus Buford and leads them upstairs to their rooms. Velma asks Lorelei who the man was that was giving her problems. Lorelei explains that he is Cyrus Buford and he wants to buy the Leland family cemetery so that he can expand his water park and hotel, the Rivergate. Apparently he's been trying to use the Leland ghost legend to make Lorelei sell, but Fred tells her that they saw them in the graveyard and it didn't look like a legend. I think that makes Cyrus Buford one of the first suspects for the gang. Lorelei seems surprised they saw them. Shaggy gets scared when he sees a painting of them on the wall, thinking they're here again. Velma tells him that it's just a portrait, and Lorelei tells them it's of her great-great-great-great-granduncles. She calls them Union Jed and Rebel Caleb. They hear someone come through the door and look over to see a tall figure in the shadows. Scooby shouts, "Ghost!" as he jumps into Shaggy's arms. Lorelei laughs and explains that it's not a ghost, it's her brother Taylor. When Lorelei asks him what he thinks he's doing scaring the guests, he apologises and says he was just tidying up the rooms. Scooby sniffs his shoes and we see mud all over them. Taylor points to one of the rooms that has the door open. Inside we see a table on its side and broken, and the rest of the room looks trashed as well. Shaggy looks at it and tells him it's nice work, which we can all see it's not. Scooby starts to whimper and Lorelei goes over to him. His ghost costume is now just a scrap of fabric in his collar. Lorelei comforts him and asks what happened when she notices the fabric. Daphne tells her that it's what's left of Scooby's Mardi Gras costume. Lorelei offers to make Scooby a new costume, because everyone needs a costume for Mardi Gras. Lorelei tells them to have a good night and leaves. Taylor turns to them and says quite creepily that they better not be going out into the cemetery. Shaggy says that he hears him loud and clear. Shaggy seems to be terrified of Taylor. He says that Jed and Caleb come out to the cemetery every night looking for new recruits to drag into their armies of the undead, which is quite scary. Not gonna lie, I wouldn't want to be there. Not only that, but he then creepily laughs as he goes down the stairs. This guy, if he's not the villain, sure sounds like one and isn't doing himself any favours. Daphne asks if anyone notices anything about Taylor's shoes. Velma immediately thinks Daphne is trying to point out a fashion faux pas. However, Daphne notices the mud on his shoes that Scooby was sniffing earlier. Velma suspects that he's been outside recently, but why this late? The gang go back to the cemetery, but Shaggy does seem to be holding a sandwich, so he found the kitchen. Daphne mentions that it's a shame Lorelai might have to sell her house. Is this a motive for our ghost? Scooby steals Shaggy's sandwich, only for it to be stolen from Scooby by some eerie eyes in the shadows. Scooby thinks this is a ghost and jumps into Shaggy's arms. Fred shines a torch to see that it's just a hungry old possum. Shaggy chases the possum for his sandwich back, jumps along the mausoleums until he falls into one of them. He turns on his torch to see a skeleton. It falls on him and he thinks the ghost has got him. The gang find him and help him out. Velma reassures him that it wasn't a ghost, it was a skeleton. Not sure that would reassure me. Shaggy seems to agree with me as he gets scared of the skull and jumps into Scooby's arms, only to say, "That's supposed to make me feel better?" Daphne notices she's got gunk on her shoe. Velma suspects that it's a clue and takes the shoe from Daphne. Shaggy wonders how Daphne is going to get back with only one shoe, when she pulls out another shoe from her bag, that she always comes prepared. A lot of my friends can tell you that, like Daphne, I am always prepared. My bag is always full of things I might need, a nail kit, plasters, all sorts. No one's complaining when I bring out what they need. Velma suspects the shoes a clue, however doesn't know what the link is yet. Fred suggests they go to an expert who might know. The gang go to the haunted New Orleans tour to see Crawdad Mike. They give the shoe to Crawdad Mike. He tells them that the icky gunk on Daphne's shoe is ectoplasm. Fred very kindly explains for anyone who wasn't sure that ectoplasm is what ghosts are made of. Velma seems sceptical to that being the answer. Crawdad Mike reassures her and says he knows all there is about the ghosts in this city. He then promotes himself and tells them that for $5 he can give them the VIP tour. I mean, business seems to be booming, but you can't just give away your knowledge for free. Clearly, Crawdad Mike is a businessman. Velma, convinced she got the information they need, and even that she is sceptical of, so declines his offer. Shaggy mentions before they get to work they need to eat. The gang sit at a restaurant stall and have gumbo, except for Daphne who has a salad. After Shaggy mentions the ice cream, mushroom, pizza, milkshake gumbo, I think the salad sounds safer. Shaggy thinks it needs hot sauce and finds a 5-skull fire sauce to add to his gumbo, which is very hot sauce indeed. The gang are talking about the legend of the Leland brothers when they notice Lorelai going into the supermarket of the supernatural. Daphne calls out to her, but she doesn't hear her. The gang gets Scooby to spy on Lorelai. The way Scooby sneaks to the store is funny. He makes himself the same shape as the bench and the lamppost. I like this type of physical humour used in cartoons. I think it appeals to the children as well, especially younger children that aren't really too bothered about the plot. We also see this physical humour again when Scooby mimes what Lorelai bought. Lorelai bought bat wings, chicken bones, and the eye of a toad. This apparently sounds like voodoo. I mean, it doesn't sound like the most normal of shopping lists, but I do wonder how much the gang know about voodoo stuff. The gang then decide to go to Cyrus Buford's water park for clues. They walk through the cemetery to get there and see Taylor walking through with a lamp and an old soldier's uniform, like the ones Jed and Caleb's ghosts wear. If he wasn't already a suspect, this definitely isn't looking good for him. The gang get to the water park and Fred tells the gang to split up and look for clues. Shaggy's already found a clue. One of the ghost's hands on his shoulder. The gang back away from the ghost only to see that the other Leland brother is right behind them. Fred tells the gang his plan is to run. The gang scatter into different directions and run from the ghost. Also, the music in this chase scene is called Man with the Hex, which was also in the 2002 live-action Scooby-Doo film. Not only that, but in the song it has a reference to the Labyrinth song Dance Magic Dance. I thought it was kind of cool. As always, I'm going to mention how much I love the music. This music also makes me feel nostalgic because it was in the 2002 Scooby-Doo live-action film, which was 18 years ago now. It's crazy. I had this on video when I was younger. I can't quite believe it was that long ago. But the music is an amazing piece and it fits in so well with the chase scene and the plot. In the lyrics it mentions voodoo, and we've just seen Lorelai go into a supernatural supermarket to buy voodoo things, as Velma put it. If you want to, you should give it a listen. I'm sure it's on YouTube. It's a fun, upbeat song to enjoy. Also, I know this seems to be a running theme with the chase scenes, where Shaggy and Scooby have a funny interaction with the monster or ghost in this case, but I found it so funny that they wave at the ghost and he just waves back all happy until they pull funny faces at him. They slide down the water slide with the ghost trying to chase them from the other side. We also see them at a food stand pretending to work there, and the ghost just goes up to order. Does he not realise it's them? Does he not think he should be trying to continue to chase the people he's been chasing? Is now really the time to go get a sandwich? Well, this ghost seems to think so. Scooby offers to put mustard on his sandwich, and the ghost just smiles and moves the sandwich to him to get some mustard, and Scooby just squirts him in the face with mustard. Why are these ghosts so trusting? Also, there's a lot of technology here in the water park. They have the water slides, and they have a wave pool. It doesn't even feel like they're trying to show off the technology. It just feels very natural and not out of place at all. I find the changes and the addition of more modern technology quite interesting because they seem to go about introducing it in different ways. In Space Ape at the Cape, the modern technology was very in your face and there was so much of it, but in Big Scare and the Big Easy currently, we're seeing modern technology, but it's not being shoved in our faces. But we'll see if the villain reveal will change that. The gang managed to get away and see Cyrus Buford, who wants to know what they're doing in his water park. Fred tells them that they're trying to get to the bottom of the Leland brothers mystery. Cyrus tells them that they shouldn't be running around his water park at night and that it's dangerous. Shaggy agrees that it's dangerous and mentions they've just been chased around the park by the Leland brothers. Cyrus seems surprised that the gang have seen the ghost too and mentions that the ghost scared off his staff and now he can't open the water park. Seems like Cyrus is less of a suspect as the ghosts are harming his profits. The gang notice that Daphne has gone missing. The gang decide that the best place to look for Daphne is the cemetery, as that's the most likely place the ghosts would take her. As soon as they walk into the cemetery, they notice fresh footprints on the floor, and they look like they're heading inside the cemetery. Shaggy mentions that ghosts shouldn't leave footprints, but Velma tells him that they do if they wear Civil War boots. They decide to follow the footprints to find Daphne. At that moment, Scooby is sniffing a bush. A possum ends up on his head and he sneezes, causing himself to be propelled towards the gang and covered all the footprints so they can't be seen anymore. The gang have no way of knowing where to look for Daphne now. Fred decides that he and Velma will check the cemetery and that Scooby and Shaggy should stay where they are and guard the gates to make sure no one gets in and, more importantly, no one gets out. While exploring the cemetery, Fred sits on a rock so that he can make his plan and ends up setting off lights which beam around them from up in the tree. Another clue. While Scooby and Shaggy are guarding the gates, they hear a wailing noise. They run away before Shaggy notices it's a girl's voice and that it might be Daphne. Scooby tells Shaggy to call Daphne's cell phone. They follow the sound of her mobile ringing to a mausoleum. They open the door to rescue Daphne, but the door ends up closing on them and they're stuck, and the light from their torch goes out. Velma is digging a hole and tells Fred it's deep enough, and Fred comes over with moss. Fred calls Velma Vel, which is interesting as we haven't yet heard anyone give Velma a nickname in this series so far. Fred says he's built a foolproof trap, but calling something foolproof might just jinx it. It's not a simple plan. He expects the ghosts to trip over the barrels and fall into the water slide, which they will then get caught in a wire spring on a catapult. Fred will then pull the trigger, which will fling them into the pit covered by moss. We see Shaggy, Scooby and Daphne in the mausoleum again, and Shaggy removed the gag on Daphne. He struggles with the ropes though, and ends up using his 5-skull fire hot sauce, which will burn through anything. Daphne is free, but they're locked in. Daphne breaks Scooby's tag off his collar and explains that it's the old eyelash curler metal dog tag technique. The way she says this makes me think that she's done this before, especially the way Shaggy says, "Of course, why didn't he think of that?" This technique must have been used quite a bit. Anyway, they manage to escape the mausoleum using this technique. They immediately come face to face with the ghosts. Just want to mention that kidnapping is illegal, so these villains are just adding to their crimes. Fred and Velma are waiting in the spots to catch the ghosts with their trap. They hear someone coming, but false alarm, it's Daphne, followed by Scooby, with Shaggy on the barrels from the trap. Shaggy ends up going through the trap with Fred setting off the catapult, but luckily he falls just short of the pit. Unfortunately for Shaggy, the ghosts are coming straight for him. Luckily for Shaggy, Scooby dresses up as a phantom and scares the ghosts into moving back and falling into the pit. The ghosts can't get out of the pit, and Fred ties a rope around the two of them. Lorelai comes over and asks what's going on. Fred says that this duel is over. Daphne says she suspects it's Taylor. Fred wonders, with Cyrus T. Buford? Who do you think it is? Well, we're about to find out if you're right. Velma takes off their masks to show us Crawdad Mike and his bus driver. It's nice to see the police are taking away Crawdad Mike and the bus driver. I always like when the people behind the monsters are held accountable for their crimes, even if they were wearing a costume and a mask. Daphne asks Lorelai why she went into the supernatural supermarket. Lorelai explains that she was looking for a talisman to keep the evil spirits away, and a mask for Scooby's Mardi Gras costume. Fred asks Taylor why he was walking around the cemetery with the soldier's costume. He explains it was an old family heirloom that he had to sell to help pay the bills. He also mentions that the reason he snuck out at night was so that Lorelai didn't know. All of a sudden the fog rolls in and we see the ghosts appear again. Shaggy and Scooby get scared, but Velma tells them to calm down and explains it was a hologram that's projected from the treetop. This is another example of modern technology. She mentions that it was set off by pressure on the rock, the same rock that Fred sat on earlier. She further explains by telling them that the driver used dry ice to make a mist to project the ghosts onto. Daphne explains that dry ice leaves a residue. This was what was on Daphne's shoe, not ectoplasm. Crawdad Mike was scaring his tourists with the ghosts and then making lots of money. When the gang came close to exposing them, they decided to kidnap Daphne to scare the gang away. Crawdad Mike tells them he would have gotten away with it if it weren't for your meddling kids. Daphne says, I wonder what you call meddling kids in French, and everyone laughs. If you're wondering, it's ingérence des enfants. Shaggy throws beads off the balcony, and we see Fred and Velma together, talking. Fred asks Velma why she was sure that the ghosts weren't the Leland brothers. Velma replies that one of the brothers is much taller than the other, but the ghosts were the same height. Lorelai turns up with Taylor and Cyrus and tells the gang that they're celebrating because they've decided to join together and make Leland land. Cyrus gets his water park and hotel resort that he's always dreamed of, and Lorelai will run a themed restaurant in the house. Taylor will be guiding authentic tours of the Leland family cemetery. It seems like everything worked out well and they partnered up to stop from going bankrupt, and Cyrus has his dreams come true. Daphne thanks Shaggy for saving her, but Shaggy says she should thank herself because they wouldn't have found her if she didn't wail. Daphne points out she couldn't have called for help. She was gagged and couldn't make much noise. We then hear an eerie howl. New Orleans has a relationship with the spirit world, which I think is what this eerie howl is a reference to. I like the way they've taken real facts such as mausoleums in New Orleans, or that there's a perceived connection to the spirit world in these mausoleums. It just shows us the care and research that they went into creating these episodes. The three of them look scared before Scooby says, Scooby-Dooby-Doo, but matches the do to the whale. Okay, so this was the 4th episode of What's New Scooby-Doo. My best bit was probably the theme of this episode. I loved that it was set in New Orleans. I loved the costumes the gangs wore and the upbeat music. I just loved the look and the feel, and also the added facts of New Orleans that were added into the episode. The music during the chase scene, Man with the Hex, was also so good. Probably one of the best so far. Loved every minute of it. Especially the reference to the Dance Magic Dance song in the Labyrinth, which I also love. The worst bit was when Velma was like, leave it to Daphne to notice a fashion faux pas. It just seemed a little catty, and I like to think they're better than that. And we should be building each other up, not tearing them down. Daphne's not dumb. She was pointing out a clue which, apart from Scooby, no one else seemed to notice. Also, there's nothing wrong with Daphne liking fashion. It doesn't make her any less smart. And I think if anything, sometimes it helps her when they're looking for clues or need to identify something, like identifying the powder to be makeup in Space Ape at the Cape, and noticing that Janet wasn't wearing any makeup at the ceremony, and knowing that the bat guano is used in makeup in 3D Struction. The funniest bit was where Scooby steals Shaggy's sandwich, but then a possum steals the sandwich from Scooby. Then, for some reason, Shaggy still wants his sandwich and decides to chase the possum for it. I felt sorry for Shaggy at first, that Scooby stole his sandwich, but in the end I just thought the whole thing was ridiculous and funny. I also found the chase scene funny, where the ghost just happily waves at Scooby and Shaggy, and then gets a sandwich from them when they're dressed up as food vendors. It just made me laugh how happy the ghosts look, like both times. My favourite supporting character for this episode was Lorelei Leland. I liked that she was strong and stood up for herself against Cyrus Buford. She was so nice and friendly to the gang and even made Scooby a new costume for Mardi Gras. This is the end of my 4th podcast episode. Thank you for listening. I wonder if you thought the same as my best, worst and funniest bit. Was Lorelei Leland your favourite supporting character this episode? Whether you agreed or disagreed, I'd love to know your thoughts about this episode, and I may even feature them in my next episode. The next episode will be Season 1, Episode 5. It's mean, it's green, it's the Mystery Machine. So get ready to listen to the next podcast. Just to let everyone know that there is a link in any of the episode descriptions to the transcript for that particular episode, or you can just go to my website and go to the blog page and pick the episode you want. If you want to ask any questions or even just mention anything you liked about this episode, you can go to my website, meddlingpodcast.com. That's meddlingpodcast.com, or you can email me at feedback@meddlingpodcast.com. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts about Scooby-Doo, whether it's this episode, another episode, or just Scooby-Doo in general. Thanks for listening and stay groovy.